welcome along to 101 Part-Time Jobs. I'm Giles Bidder, and I speak to bands, musicians, artists about what they've done along their way, how they've survived, and my aim is to get out some funny stories, some of the part-time jobs they've had. We're very lucky for Matt Baty from Pigs to be joining us on this episode. Their record Viscerals that came out last year is an absolute stonker, and this is Crazy in Blood is the track you're listening to behind this. I'm sure if you're listening to this then you know it, and I hope you play it loud after this. But Matt's got some great stories. He's working at an independent publisher called Wipeout Music. Go and have a look and see what they're doing, and he's got some brilliant tales from his life along the way. So cheers for coming. Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please do tell your friends. And one feature I want to start is getting your stories. So if you've got a story about a horrible or brilliant or tragic or profound story from a part-time job or a real, full-time job that you've had in the past, or record it on a voice notes and send it to me at 101parttimejobspodcast@gmail.com, and we'll get it in a future episode. All right, here's Matt Baty from Pigs. Signature Brew are the official beer of 101 Part-Time Jobs. They've made beers with The Darkness, Mastodon, Idols, Slaves, and if you go onto their website, signaturebrew.co.uk, and you live in the UK, you can get beers delivered directly to your door with the voucher code 101podcast, all capitals. You can get 10% off. All right, here's Matt. Go well. Cheers! Viscerals is such a great album. It's so good. And I guess that's the first thing I want to ask you about is it's really kicked off in the last year or so. And so what does that feel like now?
It was obviously very exciting time. I've always said that it was largely unexpected. It's not something we ever envisioned really or particularly pushed for. I mean, we were in a band, it sounds cliche, but we were in a band to just have fun and have a laugh with it. And, we did want to, you've got your bucket list and you've got like certain festivals on your bucket list that you wanted to play or certain bands that you'd want to play with. And fortunately we were able to do that. There were amazing, like quite left field festivals in the UK, Supersonic and Super Normal being ones that spring to mind, and we got to play them, and we were just really happy with that, and then everything kind of felt a little bit like we were taking, we felt, and we were aware of the steps forward we were taking. We would travel from Newcastle down to London on a weekend and just do the one show and then drive back to Newcastle again. But we enjoyed doing it, even though it quite often took like 7 hours to get to Brixton or whatever. But we enjoyed doing it. We were meeting amazing people and just having a great time doing that. We did that for a long time. We did that for like 4 years before we put out our debut album, the debut full-length album anyway. And we were just kind of, just gigging, just doing gigs on a weekend before then. As I say, just going down to London, doing one gig, coming back, going to Glasgow, doing one gig, coming back.
You mentioned having a bucket list earlier. Did that kind of change in that time? Did it sort of evolve?
It does change. It morphs over time because you kind of, I suppose you always have a grasp on of kind of where you're at and what feels achievable. I think particularly, I don't know if this is unfair, but I've been playing music for a long time, and I've seen it in a lot of people where musicians can have kind of unrealistic expectations as to what they want to do or what at least they see as like being the goal and not, I suppose, valuing the worth of where they're at currently and just kind of enjoying where they're at in the present moment. But as you kind of travel along, you do start to get a sense of like, oh, hang on a minute, maybe we could do that festival now, or maybe we can, like, I mean, one of the big things for, the big first steps for us was even just headlining a show in London. That was like, oh wow, they want us to, like, there was a great promoter at the time, and he was like, oh yeah, come down, and it was just at the Brixton Windmill, and he was like, oh no, yeah, we want you to headline. We were like, wow, really? Okay. And we went down, the show sold out, and to date that's still one of, that sticks in my mind as one of the best gigs we've ever played. It was brilliant. And once you've kind of done that, it's like, oh well, maybe next time we play in London, we could do a slightly bigger venue. So you kind of always doing that. And like most recently, well, it feels like it was about a decade ago now, but we headlined a show at the Scala as part of the touring that we did for King of Cowards, and that sold out. Now, when we booked that show, our manager and booking agent were like, okay, so we're thinking that the next step up for you now, because we did Moth Club just as that album came out, and that sold out. And again, we were just like, oh wow, that's brilliant, that's amazing.
Yeah, great venue.
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was so hot and humid. It was it was a little bit terrifying, actually. Like, I remember, like,
humid and everywhere sparkly.
Yeah, just like this shimmering gold in your eyes, like blinding, and everything's wet. But yeah, we did that, and that was great. And then it was like, okay, so the next one you're going to do in London is the Scala. And we were like, whoa. I mean, that at the time, the promotion and the stuff around that album, it did feel like it had bubbled up a little bit and like moved on from what we had from the previous album, but it still didn't feel like, well, we can play at the Scala and sell a decent enough amount of tickets not to embarrass ourselves, and it went from there, really. And so we played that show, that sold out. That was incredible. That's another one that kind of sticks in my mind as like a real, not a turning point, but like, it was it felt like a milestone, like being there and like seeing so many people and just being like, whoa, something's really happened here. And then, of course, like once you've done that, you do have the bucket list. It was like, oh well, maybe we could play it somewhere like Green Man or End of the Road Festival. And so your ambitions kind of do evolve and develop, I suppose. But I do think it's important not to like start a new band today and go, right, okay, so let's we want to be playing Glastonbury next year. It's like, well, you drive yourself crazy doing stuff like that, I think. And I've been in bands in the past where I think we've maybe had unrealistic expectations, and it just puts like a real downer on what you're trying to do. It just frustrates. That's all it does.
Yeah. I was in a band called Great Cynics, and it was a band that I started. Sorry?
It's a good name.
Well, we actually had to change it. I was called Cynics. I played in as an acoustic project when I was like 18. Put out our first album on Household Name Records, which was for me fucking huge. I'm like a light year cap down.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the like ska punk record label, wasn't it?
Yeah. But when we released that record, I mean, that really like hits a church bell within inside of me, because those first couple of years, I was like, wow, this is so cool. I get to experience this with not only my friends, but with strangers. It was a real incredible feeling. Uh-huh. And then after a few years, I definitely, with retrospect, I can say this and, be thankful that I guess I've learned something. But at the time, it's a horrible feeling, because I kind of went over to the dark side in the way that I was thinking, let's get that press person. Let's try and get that booking agent. And I was always looking outside of within myself.
Sure. Yeah.
And that was my big mistake.
Yeah. It's nothing to be ashamed of, though. Like I said, I've been in those positions in the past as well, and like you say, you just have moments of reflection on those and go, oh yeah, maybe that wasn't the healthiest way to kind of approach what we were doing.
But in a wonderful sense, it's like, looking forward, you still know that you love playing music. You still know that you can see the appreciation from that real, like, first pure feeling. I mean, for you, is it a case of holding on to that? Have you had to kind of rearrange, refocus yourself to make sure you're thinking about that and not anything else? You know, have you got friends or loved ones who kind of help remind you of that?
Yeah, I mean, well, one of the hardest things I think for me from the the pandemic and the situation that we've been in. Obviously, we put out Viscerals right at the start of the pandemic. Really, it was just as like the full lockdown was coming in. Really, I think we were like 2 weeks, 3 weeks into the first lockdown, and our album came out. And at the time, it was just, obviously, it was like I kept laughing to myself because I was like, "This is literally, in the very real sense of that word, the worst time ever in my lifetime to have released a new album. Like, this is the worst time." But it had to go ahead, and yeah, one of the hardest things I think, moving on from the initial support that we had, which was really overwhelming and really good. And actually, I look back and think of that initial time. Obviously there was chaos going on in the world, and that was really horrible situations happening. But from like a very personal sense, anyway, it was like I look back at those few weeks or couple of months quite fondly, because it gave me and the rest of the guys in the band some amount of positivity. We were chatting to a lot of people. We were reading real nice reactions to the album. People, really took to the album, which was great, because at that point it was all a bit unknown. It was like, okay, so what does happen when albums come out now? But one of the biggest things, as time went on and the months went on, and like that initial kind of bloom of activity around the album and around the band started to wane, it was losing. I don't know. I feel like the hardest thing for me was not having the live shows and having the connection with people. Like, that's always been the real fundamental of the band. Like I said, we spent 4 years just gigging and meeting people and just having a cool time on the road. And that's always been the most important thing for me, and the most enjoyable thing for me. Obviously reading reactions to album releases is a really nice thing, and it's wholesome and fulfilling. But without having that kind of real human connection, it gets difficult.
It is about chatting to someone in a smoking area sometimes. That will be, you meet one or two people and that will be the highlight of that night.
Yeah, without a doubt. One thing we were always still keen on doing was we do our own merch. So we sit behind the merch table, and actually quite often people will like chat to me and like buy things from me and not realize like I'm in the band, which is quite good. So yeah, it's that I really miss. It's that kind of sense of community that I miss, and that's been difficult.
Did you feel like you were working less, like, because just traveling, that feels like that is graft, that's kind of graft defined. But doing everything from home, you can be grafting just as much. You'll be spending as many hours as you would do traveling to a gig on emails, for example, or on social media or whatever, reaching out to people.
Sure.
Did you feel like you were kind of not working as hard because of that?
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. I mean, one thing that you kind of underappreciate, I suppose, or don't realize at the time, is just how kind of exhausting touring is, and being on the road a lot. It's difficult physically, like it's mentally quite difficult as well, because you're physically exhausted, and it does put a lot of strain on you. And that's one thing I noticed. It was like this. I had a lot more energy, which was a good thing, but also I kind of quite quickly, early on in the pandemic, I was like, I need to do something with this like physical energy, and it needs to get burnt off. So I've done a lot of I've done a lot of exercise and stuff, and actually I'm kind of healthier than I've ever been.
You don't realize it, don't you? Because when you're traveling all the time, you get into that routine. It becomes the norm, right?
Yeah, it's a weird groove that you get into, because like you'll wake up you know, you end up going to bed at like 1 or 2 a.m. or whatever. And then you get up in the morning to like drive somewhere else and you're exhausted all day, like just kind of catnapping in the van or whatever. And then you get to the venue, you've got like, our backline is ridiculous. It's so heavy. You got to like lug all of that stuff in and set it up. And then all of a sudden you're like, you know, an hour before stage time, you just endorphins just kick in and you're wide awake and you're absolutely buzzing again. And then you do the show, and then, you know, you're up a height for hours and hours afterwards, and like lying in bed with like my eyes open for a few hours trying to get to sleep, knowing that I'm gonna be feeling like hell in the morning, just like trying to tell myself, no, really, you need to go to sleep. You're really tired. Just go to sleep. So yeah, there was there was that, and yeah, you obviously, with the promotion of the album and stuff at home, there was none of that. But I got into this like weird, I had to stop myself doing it. Like at some point during last year, I was like, wow, you're sleeping a lot. I was sleeping for like over 10 hours a night. I was like, I can't.
I fully support it.
Yeah, I can't keep that up. But like after a while, at first I was like, this is great. And then after a couple of weeks of it, I don't know whether it's cause or effect, but like my mental health started to like, I really felt a shift. And I was like, I think I need to cut back on the sleeping, because I don't think it's. I felt like it was accelerating like a poor negative health cycle. So I started to set an alarm in the morning.
Yeah, well, I think morning can be the best time when the sun's going down so early. You got to make use of that.
Yeah, without a doubt. At the moment, I'm like really loathing the kind of just the darkness in the morning.
It's fucked.
Yeah, it's all
reminds me of getting the bus at like 15 to school, being like, this is the worst thing ever.
Yeah, it's not very nice. Yeah, I'm sick of it.
So you're, you know, fantastic. I'm so glad that you're being up for doing this, because, you know, running Box Records and working at Wipeout Music, everything that you just said there about touring and, you know, that kind of day-to-day dynamic of playing music and, you know, touring music, especially, you must have met, you know, must have heard so many stories. And I wonder like how those kinds of relationships and, you know, how you understand how other bands, you know, work, how that's like affected you, or how that's changed the way you look at how you do things.
I've always felt like for a long time, I've been in a pretty good position in terms of like day jobs, because the day jobs that I've had for a long time have kind of been very sympathetic to my need to, you know, do the band stuff and be out on the road. So I've always kind of had, well, not always had jobs where we'll get to that, I suppose. But for a long time, I've had jobs where I've been able to take enough time off to be able to go on the road and do what I want to do, basically, and on that front. And if I'd need to take unpaid leave, I'd just take unpaid leave, you know, and being able to do it, or you know, work remotely. You know, sometimes quite often actually, I'll have my laptop open in the van and I'll be doing emails or doing other bits and pieces that my day job requires.
Are you quite good at that? Were you quite good at opening your laptop in the back of the van?
Yeah, because the more time I spend on the road, the kind of this is going to sound awful, but the less time I want to hear anyone else in the band talk in the van.
I understand.
Yeah, well, it's just, you know, I love them all very much, but you know, like I said earlier, you're exhausted, you're tired. Everyone starts to feel a bit, you know, you get irritated by like really small things, and it's not because anyone else is doing anything particularly heinous. It's just because, you know, you're in a funky mood. So quite often I'll take myself out of that situation because it's my issue rather than anyone else's, and I'll just put headphones on and get my laptop open and just do some work, and it redirects the focus of my attention in a way that I think's healthier for everyone else.
I was going to say, it sounds like a positive thing because, you know, you're working towards something. I think that's a good feeling.
Yeah, totally. And I And I love the work that I do. You know, my day job is, you know, something that I'm passionate about. Wipeout Music, it's an independent publishing company. To my knowledge, we're the only like full-time publishing company in the northeast, if not like in a even wider region than that. There are three of us that work there, and we work really, really hard, and we work really hard for the bands on the roster.
And they're all independent bands. You know, they're bands of all
Yeah,
kind of, you know, pretty broad range of genres in there.
yeah. I mean, the biggest stack that we've got on the roster is Sleaford Mods, and that's been, you know, obviously they're hugely successful.
And they're a beacon for, you know, me and a lot of people I know, and you know, into independent music and doing things yourself and doing it well, and you know, being yourself. I think they're massively inspirational for that, and I think we need more. I want more of that. You know.
Yeah, totally. I mean, they've not really changed it. I mean, each album is different, and you hear different developments, and you hear different directions, but they never once really changed their blueprint too much, and I respect that. You know,
They didn't look like they've been like appeasing anyone.
no, absolutely not. From day one, they've presented themselves as exactly who they are, and their music reflects that as well. And there's a real honesty in it, and it's genuine, you know. And I think that's why so many people have taken to it. You know, on paper, you know, if you're trying to explain what the Sleaford Mods were to someone who's never heard them before, it kind of sounds insane and like it shouldn't work at all.
Yeah.
And it has no right to work, but it really, really does. And yeah, like I say, they're just able to, you know, just being just so genuine, it really connects with people.
Yeah.
And they've always they've maintained this like amazing upward curve with it that's just kept going and going and going, and they pick more and more people up as they go. And that's a really great thing. Like, you know, a lot of bands will kind of, I don't know, hit a point early on, and then, you know, they've hit the ceiling. But with Sleaford Mods, they've just kept going, which is good.
Very John Peel vibe about them as well.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
it's new and it's different and it's weird and it's cool.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I respect them a lot.
How long have you been working with them for?
So with Wipeout, I think I'm coming up to, well, I've just gone past my 4-year anniversary. So obviously we do the music publishing for Pigs as well, which is actually something we signed with Wipeout before I started to work at Wipeout. So it's, yeah, I get to kind of promote our music as well through that, and try and seek out different opportunities for us. So we work with like bands from across like a huge range. Like some of them are just starting out, and we just like their music. Some of them are a bit more further on down the line, and we take them and we try and what one thing that we do is, aside from the publishing company, I suppose, is, you know, we'll try and help develop a band, I suppose, want for a better term. You know, if it, a lot of the bands that come to us, if we enjoy their music, you know, but they don't have like a manager or a booking agent or a record label, we kind of, we'll try and put them in touch with the right people that we work with and who we trust, and who trust, you know, we trust they'll do a good job and they're a nice fit for them.
And that's so important because there's so many of these, you know, con people out there. And I think I think it is easy to forget that, you know, looking at the Wipeout site made me so excited because I was like, fucking brilliant. There's still so much independent love and joy and, you know, like starting points out there. Because I think it can be easy to forget that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, on the flip side, we've also had like, we've got a lot of bands on the roster that have been on like major labels or major publishers, like huge publishing companies. The terms of the contract have run out, and they've, you know, we've had conversations with them where they just say, you know, we want to come to you, and we're just happy that we know and we're confident that you'll put in work for us. And whatever happens, you know, something might happen. But they've been on like bigger publishers where they've just sort of just sat and like just been like a really small fish in a really, really big ocean and just felt completely cast aside and neglected. But they still have the want to create and, be creative, make music. They still want to be a band, which, and again, like, I admire that as well, because I suppose it would be quite easy for, a band to be on a major publisher or whatever, and then their contract just runs out, or the publisher's just like, no, this isn't working for us, actually, and for a band to be really, set back by that and just go, oh, well, what's the use,
And publishing is like the financial stability of publishing is more prominent than record label advances, right?
Yeah, kind of.
How does that work? Publishing's always been a bit of a mystery to me.
Yeah, it is to a lot of people. Actually, it's a bit of a dark art. So, what a publisher does is, traditionally, with any commercially released piece of music, there are two aspects to the song. There is the master rights, which is, the actual recording, which is usually owned by the record label. And then there's the publishing rights, and the publishing rights is the composition of the song,
Right.
the song writing, and a publisher, they look after that side of things. So whenever a piece of music is played on radio, or even a gig or whatever, there in theory should be a royalty paid out to the band and to the publisher. So one of our jobs, the kind of bread and butter of what we do, is to make sure that all of the royalties for the song and the songwriters are collected and administered properly. So we do a lot of nagging of people, where we know there should be income from it and it just hasn't materialized. So we'll make sure that all of that money comes in. And then the other thing that we do is we'll look for opportunities to license a song within, like, film or TV or advertising, or anywhere where anyone might want to be using a piece of music commercially. And that's the other thing that we do. So
can that be quite tricky with the the bassist and the drummer, perhaps, where they might not be on the writing credits? I mean, it's not your problem, is it?
It's up to each band how they want to do that. We don't really get involved with that. It's completely the band's decision. How they split their writing percentages is up to them. There's a lot of bands that just, regardless, will split everything equally. To me, like, obviously I'm in a band, and I think that's a fair way of doing things. I don't ever think the drummer or the bass player should get stiffed. However, other bands, decide that, well, actually, I wrote the lyrics, I wrote the melody of the song, so I deserve a bigger chunk. There's no right or wrong way to go about it, I guess. I mean, obviously I favour the kind of straight down the middle, everyone gets a piece of the pie, because at the moment, it's difficult enough making money from music anyway, so it doesn't feel right that, if the drummer's going to put in the hard yards going on tour and things, then they're getting a smaller cut of the income as a whole. It doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah. And this is all pretty serious stuff, isn't it, really? I mean, music's fun, but this stuff, I mean, it's important to be serious about this.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, it is all quite dry information I've just given you there, but
no, but I enjoy it because I think that's the reality. I think that is what this show's about. Part of it, definitely.
I mean, it is, yeah. It's all important stuff, and it's just extra income, I suppose, for bands at a time when everyone needs that little bit of extra income. So, if we can do our bit in trying to help, but some of the what's nice is, like, a lot of the bands that we work with, like, if we get them a placement in a TV show, even if it's quite, like, what would be considered, within the music industry as, like, a low fee for the license, like, they're just delighted.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, what I spend a lot of my time doing is, like, we get emails from music supervisors with, like, briefs to TV shows that they're working on, or for adverts that they're working on, and they apologize for, like, how low the budget is. But, like, I'm looking at the budget, and it's like, no, that's, like, even for like, you know, for a band like Pigs or whatever, like that's a decent amount of money. Like that money, you know, even if it's like a couple of £1,000, like that's money that is like, I don't know, recording in a studio for 2 weeks.
Oh wow.
You know, it's a game changer for a lot of bands on our level, but for the major record labels, then yeah, that is like a really, really low sum of money, and they're just like, a lot of the time they'll just bat it away and go, oh yeah, we're not submitting music for that. Whereas like, I'll look at it, not that it's like, we don't partake in the kind of race to the bottom licensing. Like we know when people are taking the piss, you know, when they'll get in touch and go, oh, this is all we've got for this. And we're looking at it. It's like, no, for what you want to use the music for, that's taking the piss. But for others, it's like, no, don't apologize to me for this. Like that's good money. And that can help, you know, that might pay for a van and a driver for a 3-week tour. You know, it's significant stuff. Like, and that's the kind of like money that a lot of bands, and like for a long time, Pigs as well, we were kind of scrambling around to front ourselves. You know, we'd book a little tour and go, okay, well, we need to pay for a van now ahead of the tour, or we need to pay for, you know, the ferry over to Amsterdam. How do we do that?
Yeah.
We don't have the money to do it. It's hard, like, but a lot of the time we just throw our own like personal, you know, you just throw personal funds into it, and because that's what you know, we didn't view it as like a money making thing at all. Like it was a miracle if we broke even for years and years, but we were having such a good time doing it. It was like, you know, this is what we do. It's, you know, you just do it.
Was there a relief when you started working at Wipeout, or you were at Amazing Radio before that as the head of music?
Oh wow, yeah, okay, well researched. Yeah, I was, and I was there for a long time actually. So,
and that was a kind of full time. That was a proper.
Yeah, it was full time. But again, you know, I was in a situation whereby I could go away and do little tours here and there, or, you know, go away and do gigs and festivals and things, and there wasn't much uproar about it. But the thing is, like, I mean, since I was like 15, 16, like being in a band, that is the priority. Like, and just playing music and having that release and doing it, that's always been the number one. So like, I've always kind of approached other, like, Wipeout's very different because like I'm really, really passionate about it, and you know, it's a business, it's a small business, there's 3 of us work, like I'm really part of that, and I'm like, I feel like I'm really helping build something, you know, whereas like other jobs, it's been like, I felt like a bit like a means to an end. Like I need the job to be able to pay my rent, pay my bills or whatever, but I need that job to also give me the freedom to go out and do what I need to do, because if I can't do that, I'll get really, really miserable very, very quickly. And you know, I had jobs early on, like, you know, from 16 through to maybe like mid-20s where that was the case, you know, and it was like, nah, this isn't for me. Like, you know, I've walked away from I just basically quit jobs if I wasn't able to get time off because there was a gig that I wanted to play.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
which makes me sound like well, I suppose I was like really unreliable, but like I was like, nah, like that is more important to me than this income, these wages.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I will work out how to do that stuff after doing this gig, but if you don't let me, you know, I need to walk away now, and I want to do these gigs, and then I'll work out how I'm going to pay my rent after that. You know, that's always been the thing. So yeah, but Amazing Radio again was really good because, you know, obviously that's a business
all about new music as well.
Yeah, with new music at its core. So, you know, I was able to do what I needed to do there. But yeah, before that, I had a few jobs where that wasn't the case. So I kind of just walked away from them. I was just like, never again. I'm gonna try and bide my time and find something that fits. But I think, like, in terms of finding those jobs, I think like longevity goes a long way. I was able to show, when you're applying for such jobs, it's like, oh no, this guy's been doing this for years, just like off his own back, just, being in bands for several years and just doing it and just putting out records on Box Records and things. And like, I had enough evidence to show that, like, yeah, I've been doing this for ages. I might not know how to do everything, and I don't know the music industry in and out. That's not the point. Like, I suppose I had enough evidence to prove that I was dedicated to it, I suppose. And that goes a long way, which is like, I suppose it's my heart goes out to people who, in fact, again, I went through this same process. Like, you come out of, like, you obviously music courses and performing arts courses and arts courses, I suppose, at universities and colleges, they're immensely popular. They'll fill the quota of students up year on year. It's not like it's a really dull subject. There's always going to be like mountains of people that, yeah, I want to work in the music industry, or I want to be a musician, I want to be an artist, and I want to create, and I want that to be my life. And I understand that, and why not? Like, people should have those dreams and ambitions. That's right to have that. But where I think there's a real shame in that, like, these courses and these institutions, the universities and colleges, they're run as businesses. They're money making machines, right?
Yeah.
And so they'll put a lot of money into these courses, to be able to take on so many hundred students, and they'll always keep like developing bigger performing arts places and things like that, so they can take on more students, because they know that the demand is there for those courses.
Yeah.
And then all that happens is that, like, you have a decent enough time like studying that stuff and doing that stuff, and then all of a sudden it just comes to an end, and you're like, right, like, as my parents would say, you're in the real world now. And it's like, okay, well, I've got my degree in music production. What do I do now? Like, how do I get a job in the music industry with these qualifications? And it's like, oh my goodness, like the vacancies aren't there, the jobs aren't there.
Yeah.
And where'd you go? Like, that period of time from like ending college, I did a foundation degree in music production, and then like the few years after that were just, on reflection, like really, really not a nice time. Like, it was such a confusing time, and you needed a job. I needed a job. What I did was I moved from Newcastle to Manchester, because I was in a band at the time. And again, it's, that kind of, well, this is my number one thing. This is what I do. I was in a band at the time, but they were based in the Northwest, and they were finishing uni at the same time. They were in Preston Uni. So we were like, well, why don't we all move to Manchester and have a go at being a band? And wow, that became like we did some really cool stuff, but also like it was a really, really confusing and stressful time for me. I moved from Newcastle to Manchester, rented a place, didn't have a job. So, it was my first kind of dip into the world of the benefit system that was there at the time. And like, you'd go in the job center every week and kind of, well, I've applied for these jobs this week, and them sending you on CV writing courses and stuff like that. And at the time I was like, no, well, I was desperate for a job, because I was like, how on earth am I going to pay my rent? I got housing benefit and stuff, but it didn't go very far at all.
In the period of time that you're supposed to be doing these things with the band.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, that was kind of my first real sense of this like friction. It's like, okay, how on earth does this work in reality? Like, how does this work? I remember I tried to I was applying for jobs at like XFM and stuff like that in Manchester, and there must be hundreds and thousands of people applying for vacancies at radio stations at any given moment in time. So I was just like looking for things that, just working in a cafe or whatever, and they'd look at your CV. And quite often I was getting that, like, that classic line of like, we think you're too qualified. And it's like, what on earth? I started taking off like that I had a degree in music production. I started taking it off my CV,
Really?
and getting better reaction because it wasn't on there.
Wow.
Which is wild, isn't it? But I think, it's such a weird time, that, because you got a lot of people coming out of like performing arts courses and or arts courses with degrees and things, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I've got to, student loans and things stop, and it's like, I've got to get a run-of-the-mill job now, and that's not what I'm trained to do. That's not where I envisage this going, and it can be a real downer. But you've got to try and change your mentality a little bit and just see like the run-of-the-mill jobs as like, no, this is a means to an end. This is, this means I can carry on doing what I'm passionate about, and hopefully if you keep pushing it, if you keep pushing your passion, like, I'm convinced over time it might happen more quickly for some people. It might take years and years and years for others, but good, cool stuff happens, and you've just got to appreciate those moments when they do happen, because they might not happen again. And just keep gently massaging it, and just keep it loose, but keep it going and keep it going forward. But that's like a really difficult thing to do when you start, working 8 or 9 hours a day, and then, oh, I've got band practice tonight, oh, I'm exhausted.
Yeah. I feel like everyone I know has that, or like 90% of people I know have that thing where it's, you might have a chat and be like, mate, I'm so down because I don't want this job that I'm working every day right now. I don't like it. They don't like me. What do I do? It's
hard work, isn't it? Like, and obviously then, once you get into that kind of negative funk as well, it then imposes itself on your ability to create as well, and be creative.
Be yourself.
And it just becomes this like really toxic cycle, but it's hard. But like, there's not many situations that are ideal anyway, I guess. I mean, this year, has gone to prove that to me as well. And at one point I was having like some counseling sessions, which I benefited from a lot. And I spent a lot of time talking to my therapist about, like, I was like, music's my number one. That's my release. That's my thing. And it's gone, and I can't do that now. And now I feel like a few months into it, I'm really starting to feel the effects of it. And she was like, well, at one point she just said, why aren't you making any music? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I don't know. I was like, well, I did try to make some quite early on in the pandemic, just on my own at home, which is something I'd not been familiar with at all. I've always been in bands and created with other people.
Yeah.
It's been really collaborative. So sitting down at like my computer with my synthesizer or whatever next to me and a microphone, I was like, this is so alien to me. It felt really weird, but I started to put together like little bits and pieces that I was like fairly happy with, or at least I surprised myself. I was like, oh, there's something in this. But then my mind started to like tick faster toward, like, too fast. And again, this is something that I've realized I've got within myself that I kind of need to recognize and try and pull it back a little bit. I suppose it kind of relates to that initial topics we were discussing earlier on, where
wanting
like,
to just do it now.
Don't go too far ahead of yourself. I was like, because I started thinking, I was like, okay, well, how would I play this live? And who would I need to be able to do this? And it's like, what am I doing? Like, I've just made a couple of demos on my computer. I don't need to think about how to play it live. Like, just make it and enjoy it and get some sort of satisfaction out of it. I recognized that that's why I'd stopped making music on my own early on in the pandemic and gone months and months without doing it. So I tried it again. It was good. I enjoyed it, and I've got some bits and pieces together that I'm quite happy with. They need a lot of work still, but and I've gone off it again. I've not touched it for a couple of months, but maybe about a month.
For me, that kind of attitude, there's a lot of like, I think it's good to have a fair bit of humility about it, and kind of seeing yourself and just being like, trying not to think too hard about it and having a laugh with it to an extent.
Yeah, totally. Because I mean, although I say that Pigs was, for a long time, it was just a thing we did for, the pure joy of doing it. Like, after King of Cowards got fairly, a relative amount of success, you do start to, there's a trap that you can fall into whereby you start to, the schema of your thoughts starts to become, what is this piece of music for? Can it be like a single, or can it be, or what, and you start, your thought patterns start to change and mold into that kind of, I suppose, music industry way of thinking. And I don't particularly think as like a musician it's not a good thing for me personally anyway to kind of get too locked into. I really do need to just keep reminding myself, like, well, why are you doing this? Self-satisfaction, really.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's all it is.
Yeah. And looking back to that time in kind of Manchester, I presume you're in a much better place now.
Yeah, I am. I mean, at the time, like, Manchester was a really big, unfamiliar city to me. Like, I moved there and I didn't know anyone outside of, the four other people I was in a band with, which was strange because, like, I lived in Newcastle before then and had like a really quite big social network. We were, I was part of the music scene, I suppose. I knew people, would go to gigs with people up here, and I missed that when I moved to Manchester. Gradually I started to meet other people. That happens. It's a natural thing. It's part of that kind of, you just got to continue doing what if you want to go to gigs, just go to gigs, go to a gig on your own. Like, if you do that enough times, you start to see the same people at these gigs, and you just end up talking and making friends and things. But it would be quite easy to just kind of move to a new city and go, I don't know anyone, I'm not going anywhere. But yeah, it was a weird time in Manchester. It was, and I was like perpetually skint, so couldn't do a lot to enjoy myself. But like the band that we were in, we did some cool stuff. It was hard at times and really challenging and stressful. But we ended up like signing to Ninja Tune, which is nuts. Yeah, absolutely nuts.
Big deal.
Yeah, it totally was at the time. And then, like, again, like, on reflection, I've been thinking about it a lot recently, actually. At the time, I was like, oh, brilliant, we're signed to Ninja Tune, and now, this is it. This is finally, I won't need a day job. Yeah, I'll make enough money from music to be able to sustain myself. And again, that was just like a totally warped version of how I thought the music industry was, because I was like, Ninja Tune's a really big label, and this and this and this is just all going to magically fall into place for us now. And it kind of didn't. We released an album and it did okay when we toured. That was the first time I was able to like tour mainland Europe and stuff, and that was excellent in itself. But we weren't making like, if we weren't making any money really, we were like permanently in the red with it. And we did that for a few years, and it all kind of folded in on itself. But it was that kind of, I suppose, kind of moving along with it, and then getting to a point where it was like all of these things that I thought would happen haven't happened, and that happened. Right. I think all of us in the band had that sort of it was underlying that kind of like, we've not really done it, have we? And that's sad. And again, it just started to become like a kind of stressful and sad thing. Music should never be that.
Was that around the time that you worked at the service station before this chat? For anyone listening,
No,
the brief
no,
we had.
that was a little bit after that. That was the service station was kind of my first proper job. So what I ended up doing was I went to Northumbria University to study psychology.
Back in Newcastle, was that the campus?
Yeah. I kind of ended up like music, like the age of 15. It had always been my number one, but I felt like I could never. I didn't have my foot in the door in terms of like the educational side of it and the qualifications and things like that. So because I didn't, and again, I feel like this is something that, I've got this theory about like education and things and how they make people like jump through hoops for their own benefits because it's all statistical. It's all they want like X amount of people from secondary school. They want so many percent of those people they want to push into like sixth form to do their A levels because it looks good for the school stats, and that's what they need, and that's what the government want, and that's what they need to prove to be able to get decent funding. And then when you're at sixth form, they want to push you into university straight away, and you're still at an age where you're just like you're still figuring things out. Like you don't know what on earth you want to do. Like at that age, 16, and they're like, "Oh well, okay, pick some subjects to do for GCSE." So I don't know. So I ended up doing like when I was 15, they got us to pick our courses, and they kind of bracketed everything. They put everything into like categories. So oddly, like music was in the same block as PE, and I was just starting to kind of get into music at the time and play drums in a couple of bands. But I was like, oh well, I don't think I'm good enough, to do music at GCSE level. Like that's for people who play the flute and have done the grades or whatever. It was that sort of thing, and that's kind of how they present it. I was like, well, I'm in the football team. I like doing sports. I'll do PE. So, at GCSE level, that was me, PE. And then, and then it becomes, okay, so you're going to do all right in your GCSEs. You don't, you need to go and do your A levels now, and it's like, oh God, okay, well, I suppose I can't do music because I've not done it at GCSE level. So I'll do, I don't know, psychology seems pretty interesting. I'll do that. I'll do sociology. I enjoy history. I'll do that. And then, it became the same conversation when you're getting close to doing your A levels. It's like, oh, well, we think you're going to do all right. So you need to go to university this year. You need to go. Like, oh, God's sake. Okay, well, I do kind of like psychology. That's kind of interesting. I suppose I'll do that. And then, I just fell through those, I just jumped through those hoops at every stage, and then ended up sat in a lecture theatre at Northumbria Uni doing psychology. And I was like, what on earth how have I ended up here? Like, what am I doing with myself? Like, I don't want to do this. I want to make music. That's where, that's my passion. That's what I want to do. So I ended up like plucking up, like at the time I thought it was like a really big deal, and I was like, oh God, I'm going to tell my parents that I'm going to drop out of university because I want to study music somehow. And actually I'd found a course at Newcastle College, the music production course, where it was like they didn't need any like hard and fast or traditional music qualifications. I just needed to be able to like show evidence that I was who I said I was, I suppose. And, I'd been in bands since I was 16. I'd done this and that or whatever, and just had a dedication to it. I had to take some like little exams just to, I think, prove that I had ears. But then, but I built it up in my head as like a really big thing. I told my parents that I was going to drop out of university to go and do some music course at the college, and I did it, and they were like, "Oh, all right then, yeah, that's what you want to do." I was like, "What?" Like, that's it. When I dropped out of university, there was like about a year's worth of like time that I had before starting the course at the college. So I was like, well, my parents were like, well, you need to get a job in between that. I was like, yeah, okay, no bother. So I got a job at a service station, and my goodness, that's the one where I've kind of gone, I am never, I'm never ever, I cannot bring myself to work for like a big corporation and just be like this. This is just horrible. Like I just felt you're just a number, man. Like you just like there's absolutely no soul in the job. And this isn't to say like, I don't think I'm any better than anyone that works in these jobs at all. If you're in these jobs and you work in them and you have to work them, then that's fine. Don't beat yourself up about it. Like you're a human being and you are worthy of respect.
Yeah.
As long as you maintain that and like, yeah, I am, and don't let it beat you up. Like I say, I'm not any better than anyone that works in these jobs, and I've been there for myself. But I was at a point where I was like, I'm gonna leave here, and I am never gonna go back into a job like this again, because the forces at work in those places are too powerful for me to be able to battle. Like it made me miserable. It made me like just so miserable, and I just started like drinking a lot. Like just that was my escape from it. It was at a time when like a lot of my friends were away at university and just living that kind of student lifestyle, and I was like, oh man, I'm here like working 9 hours a day in this wretched place. Like it was it was just awful. It felt like a portal to like not hell, but just something else, like just some really like just really miserable, melancholic place. Like everyone or most people that go into like service stations, especially during weekdays, because they're not going anywhere fun. If they're going in there in the weekday, usually they're like traveling salesmen or whatever, and they're just as miserable and bitter about their lives as you are.
Perception of life.
Yeah, so it just feels like a breeding ground of like misery and bitterness, and so they're just having pops at you about how expensive the coffee and the sausage rolls are. It's like, mate, I'm not setting the prices here, right? I'm on like minimum wage, like this. And let me tell you, I've done the numbers, mate. They are making a gross markup on these sausage rolls. It's disgusting. I tell you who the problem is, mate. It's not me. It's you. If you don't like it, stop buying this shit. And they'll soon change it, right?
You need some sympathy when you're on tour, then, to service station people.
Oh, totally. Yeah. We've got our favourites actually, but yeah, I do. Occasionally, we have to. Not often, because the service station that I worked at is quite close to home. So we don't often have to stop there, but occasionally we'll have to stop there because someone will need the toilet or whatever and just can't hold it in any longer. And it just, when I'm stepping into that place, I get this feeling. It's like someone's putting a blanket of like just sorrow over me. And like I'll glance around and I can see like some people that still are working there, and I'm like, oh no. I hope they're okay. I hope they're okay inside. I hope they've still got a bit of fight left in them, because I know I wouldn't. I'd have surrendered by that point.
The stories you've got with Natalie Imbruglia and Derren Brown and Paul Daniels, that's not from there, is it?
Yeah, it is, totally. So I tell you what, Natalie Imbruglia, what a ray of light. I think she boosted my morale enough to just see me over that final few months while I was there, because it was so I was working like a late shift. It was quite late on. It was maybe about like 10 p.m. at night, and it was always like quite quiet around that time anyway, and I was on my own working in there, and I was doing something really mundane. I don't know, probably scraping milk froth out of on the side of one of the jars of the jugs that we had, and I turned round, and there was just this like really radiant lady stood at the counter, like, just, when you look at someone and you're just like, are you from a different planet? Like, you're not the same as me, because like I instantly felt like I was in some sort of like Lord of the Rings setting, or so, I don't know, like some sort of fantasy thing where like just I'd been approached by some celestial being, and I was just like this like hobgoblin or something. It's like really earthly mythical creature. I don't really have any like really fun story to tell her, but she was just so polite. And I like looked at her and I was like, I recognize her, but I don't know why. So I went through the customer service routine and just asked her what she wanted politely. I think I even tried to upsell her on a couple of things, because you always had to, you were meant to upsell people, would you like a large for an extra 30 pence or whatever? And I went through that, and then I was like she wanted a latte to take away. I remember that. And I turned around and I like looked, and by that point, there was a couple of people stood behind her and they had lanyards on, and it said like Natalie Imbruglia on her. On these lanyards, and oh yeah, and obviously she had like an Australian accent as well, which was like another thing that prompted me to think like this is not a normal person. Yeah. So yeah, that was exciting. She wanted a cheese and tomato toasty, and I tell you what, that is the best cheese and tomato toasty I've ever made for anyone, and I feel like she deserved it. And she was very smiley, and she said please and thank you, but it all felt very genuine and from the heart. But do you know what the most like frustrating thing about the whole thing was? That once I realized it was Natalie Imbruglia, I still couldn't break out of the customer service routine. I couldn't break out. I couldn't. There was like a voice shouting in my brain, just like, just I don't know, even just ask her for an autograph or a picture or something, and I just could not. I just kept going. I just kept going. Would you like a cup holder? And just as quickly as she appeared, she just sort of disappeared into the ether again, and I was like, wow, that was amazing.
Man, that's a brilliant story.
Yeah. And Paul Daniels, less inspiring interaction with Paul Daniels. He felt more like a traveling salesman. He had not a lot of enthusiasm left in the tank, I don't think. He was just, and this is a guy, because when I saw him, I was like, oh my goodness. Like, I saw him in the queue and I was like, there was a few people working it at the time. I was like, I hope I get him on my till, because I had the Paul Daniels, the magic set. There was like a box set, a magic set, when I was a kid, and I got it for Christmas. Must have been about 5 years old, and I loved it. But I never really like properly learned any of the magic tricks. I just used to like wave the wand around and stuff. But I had endless fun with it anyway. And I thought about that when I saw him. I was like, oh my goodness, this is big. This is huge. And then he got, and he was just rude. There was no please and thank yous. He was just like, he looked like he hadn't smiled in decades.
You remember that about him? That'll sort of probably like inform your judgment of him from now on, right? Or from then on.
I think, yeah, definitely. Well, the thing is about him, and I don't know if this says something about me, because of the way he was, I was able to break out of the customer service thing. So I asked him for his autograph. I was like, "Oh, get your autograph," and he was like, "Yeah," and he just, oh my god,
brilliant!
Like, oh, come on, give it something, mate. He looked like he could,
brilliant.
Yeah.
Matt, I've loved these stories. I tend to keep these chats for about an hour. I feel like we could chat for hours more, which I feel like, it's a dangerous game, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Especially at the moment. Like, I barely talk to anyone at the moment.
I really, really value, chatting to people on the phone these days.
Yeah,
it's
me
really
too.
nice.
It's good, isn't it? Yeah, I should probably do more of that actually at the moment. So I've started to feel the pinch again this week, with just like this feeling of like, oh god. But this has lifted me though. This has been good.
I'm so glad because Viscerals is such an incredible album, and I'm so I've listened to a lot more records in the last 12 months.
Yeah,
it's just the time, and we touched on it earlier, and everyone is going to feel very self-conscious about talking about the positive sides of what's going on, just because there's, everyone in, hospitals alone, but it is important. I think it is important. It's really important for us to think about, well, that's good. This is good. Because otherwise, we'll have nothing left to be excited about.
Well, that's it. And then I've had this thing where I've been like trying to be mindful of like, well, all right, then come on, what have you learned about yourself, and what can you take from all of these months and months and months, and take it and carve a space for that in your life when things start to go a bit more frantic again. And there's been a few things that I've probably touched on today, but like, how am I gonna carve that space for myself? Because it's really important. Like, I've still got, and I probably will for a very long time, I'll have my day job at Wipeout, I'll do the music, I'll go on tours, I'll work, but it's a really intense schedule. And like, so I need to carve time for myself where, as much as I enjoy both of those things, I need to step back from it from time to time and have just a little bubble of like, no, this is just for me to be on my own and just enjoy my own company. Because for years I've just been like constantly surrounded by people, which is nice, but also you lose a part of yourself as well if you don't have that.
Such a life skill to learn to enjoy your own company.
It is, yeah. It's not easy either. Like, because we've got so many things at play. I mean, I could go on for ages about this, but there's like so many things at play within our society and within, especially like the way technology is developing and social media and apps on phones and things like that. That they're all designed to keep your attention and like hold you and like keep you using whatever app it is. And whilst you're doing that, you're just distracting yourself from yourself, basically.
Absolutely. I've just started running, and I used Strava for a bit because I guess I wanted to see how far I was running or whatever, the usual shit. And then afterwards, I was like, no, this is my time to unplug.
Yeah. There's so many things that make themselves feel like, they're invaluable. Like you have to have them to be able to go for a run.
You don't need it at all.
Do some yoga or whatever, or even just like read a book. You're like, oh, you can app for that. It's like, no, I don't. In fact, if anything, I need to put my phone in a shoebox and leave it to one side for a few hours and just
totally.
I've tried to do, that's something else I've tried to do and train myself into, which has been like really difficult, but like just step away from my phone, like leave it on my desk. And if I don't need it at all, I don't need it. Like, but then I found like there was these like weird moments in time where I'd sit down on the couch and I'd just sit and I'd be like, this is weird. And then I'd realize that like it's those moments where I'd sit down to rest, but I'd pull my phone out and I'll just open up Twitter and just start scrolling through stuff.
It's got to be bad for your heart, that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Feel your heart rate just go crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. At a time when otherwise you'd just be looking to kind of lower your blood pressure.
Yeah, exactly. And I've enjoyed your radio show.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
And so that must be a nice thing to do.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, that started out, beginning of the pandemic almost. I was like, well, I've got loads of spare time now. It's something that I used to do anyway at Amazing Radio and enjoyed doing it. So,
was being a broadcaster ever a sort of idea? Because I always thought that makes sense to play in bands. And I've got a show on Soho Radio, which I've been doing for a couple of years, and I love it. It's called Modern Lovers, and it's on at 8 a.m. So I do play some heavier stuff towards the end of the hour, but at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday, I play a lot of folk and chill out stuff. But that has been a massive thing for me. I look at Modern Lovers in the same way that I think about or would think about being in a band. I'm enjoying it in the moment. Obviously, some people do it and make money from it, but I'm not really thinking about that. I'm just thinking about enjoying it. Yeah,
exactly. All I want from it really is just like a positive way to spend some of my time and some of the extra time that I've had. And I play a lot of bands on there that would otherwise struggle to get played on radio shows and things, and it's just stuff that I come across that I like. It doesn't really matter to me like what label it's on or what, it's just good music really. And yeah.
I write a new music column for the iPaper on Fridays, and I've been doing it
Oh,
for
cool.
7
Okay,
years
that's amazing.
now, which is crazy.
Sweet.
But only 2 or 3 years ago did I really start. I think when I wrote it before, because I didn't go into the office and I didn't really know my editor that well, it kind of felt like a bit, it was a bit like a dull thud every time I did it. I was like, oh, this doesn't actually mean anything. But it really, in the last few years, I've really thought, a lot of bands, I have exactly the same outlook. I'm putting on a lot of bands. I don't care what they are, who they are, what they look like, what label they're on. It's like, if it's a good tune, I don't mind if it's hip hop or soul or R&B, or if it's something that I'm naturally into, like heavier guitar stuff. And I love doing that. And I really feel like a duty now more than ever.
Yeah. Yeah, you shouldn't underestimate the power of that and the impact it has on people, especially if it's like a band or an artist that are just starting out, and it can mean the world to people. Definitely. It really can, like lift people's spirits and give them that extra push and motivation to carry on doing things. It's a powerful thing.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's maybe something we can all take in our day-to-day lives, whether we are doing a radio show or if we are in a band or just as a friend. I think that's a really important thing. My favorite texts to receive are like, check out this album with a Spotify link. I love that. That's happened a lot this lockdown. Yeah. And I'm kind of in the same way, like one of my New Year's resolutions is, if you're thinking of someone, give them a shout. We all have the ability to like,
should embrace that.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard sometimes, and sometimes I often think like, oh, that person doesn't want to hear from me, but fuck it, who cares?
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, brilliant, totally. Matt, thank you so much for being up for this. It's been awesome to hear those stories and hear about the working life, because I think that's another thing I was so excited. I'm so glad to speak to you about is a job in independent music such as Wipeout. That's very cool.
Yeah, and I'm very fortunate to have it, and I appreciate having it every day. Like I never ever go to the office, or not at the moment, but I'll never ever be doing that job and just feeling down about it or feel like I'm wasting my time or anything like that. I feel like I'm doing something very, very positive and worthwhile with it.
So there he is, Matt Baty of Pigs. Absolute sweetheart, lovely guy to chat to. Can't believe such a voice could come out of that lovely man. Thank you so much for listening. And as I mentioned at the start, if you have any funny stories that you'd like to read out on this show, send me a voice note at 101parttimejobspodcast@gmail.com and we'll get it in a future episode. Thanks for listening. This episode was edited by Sophie Porter. Here's Sparrer.
I've been working all day for me mate on the side, running around like a blue-ass fly. I've been working all day for me mate. Every bleeding minute I've been on the go, up and down the ladder like a fiddler's elbow. I've been working all day for me mate.
This is a mighty move.